Well, hello everybody. Pastor Randy here. Welcome to Making It Simple. It's a beautiful Tuesday. I hope this message finds you doing great today. I'm excited to continue in our conversation about growth. Now, you may think, well, Pastor, how much more is there? Do we ever stop growing? Now, physically, there comes a point in time to where we're not going to get any taller. In fact, it may go the other way. I've certainly experienced that in the last couple of years, seen some reduction from younger days. But growing in knowledge, growing in understanding, that should be a continual desire for us in all different forms. What we did, let's just use my generation, those around my age, mid 50s and up. The things that we saw, the things that we grew up with, they're not the same today. We don't have rotary dial phones on the wall. We don't have roll down windows in the car. There's all these different things that we have continued to learn. And I know people now in their 70s, 80s, and 90s that have mastered the use of one of these gimmicks. Or a computer or whatever the case. So we're ever learning. Should that not apply to our spiritual life? Should we not want to know more about the one who saved us? Should we not want to know more about the one that we desire to spend eternity with? That's a long time. Should we not want to develop that relationship stronger? So it bears the question, what does it take? How do we get there? We've talked about several components. We've talked about the necessity of a new birth. We've talked about growing beyond the infancy of that status and not staying there. But how do we get to that next place? Well, we move to this passage from 1 Peter for our lesson starting today. And I'm not sure, will this be 2, 3? I'm not sure. But this is what Peter says. Chapter 2, beginning in verse 1. Wherefore. So he's starting this off saying, okay, here's a clear statement that I want you to get. Here is a clear statement that will really need no explanation. This is as we would say in some areas, this is the bottom line. Wherefore, laying aside all. Now that word is very important. And I'll tell you why when we get further into explaining this passage. Wherefore, laying aside all malice. Now, I'm reading here from the King James. We can read it from 1,000 different other places. I will explain these words as we go through this lesson because while many of these words are not ones that we use every day, actually they are when we understand what they mean. Laying aside all malice and all guile and hypocrisies and envies and all evil speaking. So in that one verse, we see the word all used twice. There's a reason for that. And then it goes on to the next verse, verse 2. As newborn babes. We talked about that in the last series of infancy. Brand new. But you can't stay there. Brand new. He says, as newborn babes desire the sincere milk of the word. Okay, so what am I looking to attain? I want that which is going to help me grow, that which will not allow me to remain in this infant stage. And this is what he says, we desire that so that we may grow thereby. So again, we get back to this question, what does it take? We hear that question. It poses a solution, an answer, a way forward. That's what it's asking. How do we get there? How do we get there? We hear that. That's a common question in business practices. How do we close this deal? You know, we bought a house within the last 4 months, whatever. What does it take to close the deal? What do we need to wrap this up? How much do we need? What's the this or that, whatever? That's a normal question. What's it going to take? What do we need to get this project done? Okay, we're redoing several rooms in our home. What do we need? Flooring? Do we need paint? Whatever. What is it going to take to get the project done? What's it going to take to pay for it? As we've been looking in this series on growth, as we've been looking at the understanding of that, again, we have to ask that same question. What does it take? What does it take for me to grow? As a believer, as a follower of Christ, what does it take for me to get from here to there and it be real, it be effectual, it be sincere, and it cause a growing of compassion for others, but a growing in sincere and deep love for Christ? When we think about this as it applies to the physical, that's pretty well. What does it take to grow? Well, we understand some of it is natural, just going to happen. Sometimes it's pound cake. but that's a whole different. But what about our so the physical, that's easy. A lot of it is just going to happen because that's just the natural way that we're created. You're not meant to stay an infant. But others, obviously, some of the physical changes that we have obviously are things that we do to ourselves, the way we eat or whatever. But what about our relationship with God? What's that going to take? It's not just weekly church attendance. It's not just reading through the Bible. While those things are wonderful, those things are important, it all depends on what you receive from those things. If you attend service, and you may go every week, but you never receive anything, it's more of a habit, more of a, I'm supposed to go, it's Sunday, a ritual passed down from your grandmother, whatever. It's nice. It's a fellowship. It's a nice place. It's a safe place. But does it change your life? What is the information you're receiving? It's much like watching the news. What is the information you're receiving? Does it change your life for the good or for the better? What is the source of that truth? Is it true? We could go on and on and on. It's the same thing. It's like going to a restaurant. It's a beautiful building. The air is perfect. The atmosphere is perfect. The lighting is perfect. But they have no food. It's a nice place to sit. But it brings nothing to me. It helps me in no way. Reading the Bible, it's beautiful. It's flowing. There's a wonderful message there. But if I just read it as a book, as a literary thing, as a historical thing, or as just a book, it has no meaning. It has no depth. See, reading this and getting to know the author is two completely different things. What's it going to take? What's it going to take to get us there? Where do we start? Again, we go back to beginnings. We've talked about foundations and all the other stuff. Physical's easy. That one, almost anybody could explain that. The baby's born. It begins to progress as it takes in nourishment and vitamins and whatever the case it needs. And then eventually they start looking around. Eventually they hold their head up on their own. Then they are able to sit up and roll over and crawl and walk and talk back, and they grow out of all their clothes and their shoes, and then they go to school and they get okay, we could just go on and on and on. That's not hard to figure. That's not hard to understand. Anybody understands that. Anybody can see that because it's physically available. It's in within our vision. It's just not hard to see. We've all seen it. We've all done it. That's just real. That's life. We can't imagine that not happening, in fact, because if it didn't, we'd be really, really concerned. We'd be very, very upset if it didn't happen or if it didn't change, whether we're watching it through someone else or ourselves. If we could imagine when we were, I don't know, 5 or whatever we were, and looking back at that and not being where we are now. Now, we may not be happy with our position in life, but the idea of having to have remained completely dependent on someone else or never being able to take care of things yourself, that's not somewhere we want to stay. So there seems to be a great concern about advancement and evolving and changing and understanding and growing and all this stuff when it comes to the physical, when it comes to the natural. There's all these different things, and got everybody runs to the doctor every 5 minutes and take this pill and do this and do that. Everybody's concerned about that. Get a surgery, change this, lift this, tuck that. Everybody's concerned about the physical. But what about the spiritual? Why is that so far down on the list? Because it's not a priority anymore. Many have determined, I've done enough. I believe in God, that's enough. But my rebuttal to that, and again, it's not being facetious, it's not being a jerk, but the devil believes in God. That doesn't change his eternity. That doesn't change what's coming. It's all about the relationship. It's not about the acceptance or the belief that something exists. I believe that Walmart exists. It's right down the street from my house. But does that impact your life? Does that change your life? Convenience-wise and, hindering your finances, yes. But spiritually speaking, obviously not. When we look at things in general, life and maturity and on so, those things are the goal. Growing, moving out, being on your own, making your own living, having your own things. That's a part of life. Maturing, not staying immature, not staying infantile, not staying juvenile, all those things. Those are the goals. All of us had them as we were growing up. When you start getting, 10 to 12-ish, that wheel is turning. I hope I can do this. I want to do that. I've got this dream. I've got that. I want to drive. I want to have my own house. All those things. That's part of life. That's part of growing. But what about spiritually speaking? It doesn't seem to be on that list. It doesn't seem to matter. Again, do I say, am I teaching, this has to be our never-ending thought and the only thing on our mind? No. But do we even broach that? Do we even touch that? Is it even a part of our life at all? Because at some point in time, this life is over. And that's not a gloom and doom statement, friends. That is real. I have done, in the last 20 some odd years, hundreds of memorials and funeral services. Hundreds. When you begin to calculate the years and the number of people through the years, some years higher than others, it's pretty overwhelming when I look back through the notes and the things that I've prepared and done over the years. The end of this journey is real. How we prepare for the next one, that's also real. And it's important. And part of the process of getting there is the maturation, the maturity, if you will. We've talked about birth, we've talked about growing, but maturity should be the goal for everyone who is able. Now, I realize there are some people that just have some problems that they can't help, whether it's a birth thing or an effect from taking something or whatever. This is in no way to speak in any kind of denigrating way toward that. But for all of us who are blessed and able, maturity should be our goal, both naturally. We shouldn't, at my age, I shouldn't act like I did when I was 15. There's a natural process in that we should grow beyond that. But that should also apply to our spiritual life. It has to. And that's what Peter's speaking here. If you're going to grow, then there's some certain things that have to happen. In other words, what's it going to take? It should be as evident and clear as when I first held my grandson a year and a half ago. It's not the same little guy today. Because when he was, 5 or 6 pounds, now he's 40 pounds or whatever, instead of being this little big, now he's walking beside me and we're going fishing together. That's what's supposed to happen. We are able to see that. But is our spiritual life that clear? Is our spiritual life that evident? Because again, the physical's easy. We can all see that. But all of us who have a claim on our life that we love Jesus, is that evident? Is that clear? Now again, this is not said in a judgmental way. This is more of a challenge. Am I there? Do people know me in that light? Again, not being overzealous or you're never seen without a Bible, or you're always quoting scripture. And I'm not saying that those things are necessarily wrong, but you're not turning people away by them thinking you're just some kind of religious nut. But more so, they really believe this. Maybe I should. There's something different about them, their demeanor, their attitude, how they embrace things, how they care about others. There's something real about that. See, that's what drew people to Jesus. It wasn't that he carried a sign that said, "Follow me." It wasn't that he wore the t-shirt that said, "Hey, I'm cool, wear the same kind of t-shirt, use the same kind of lingo, and wear the same kind." No. It was his character. It was outward, it was visible, and it drew people because it was real. Is that part of our life? Can it say the same thing? Is it visible? We sometimes show expressions of all different sorts in our life. A lot of times that comes out during a song. Whether it's excitement and jubilance, whether it's emotions, secular music, spiritual music, whatever the case, they all different ways elicit some type of moment. Feel good, emotional, sad, whatever the case. Oftentimes it's because of the words. It's because the moment catches a certain emotion or a feel. It touches our heart. But what if our life was the song? Think about that for a minute. What if our life was the song? Bill Gaither wrote these words years ago. He said, "Since I started for the kingdom, since my life he controls, since I gave my heart to Jesus, the longer I serve him, the sweeter he grows." Think about that. The longer I serve him, the sweeter he grows. That's a personal affecting to me that gives birth to an outward expression. In other words, it becomes real. As we wrap up this introduction to the next part of this lesson, I want us to begin here by going back to our passage. We find the formula here. The formula. Eggs, milk, sugar, flour, whatever the case is, the formula to make a cake. Engines and oil and chains and whatever are the beginning of the starting process for a vehicle. What is the starting process to mature as a believer, to really grow in our faith that becomes an outward expression. Here it begins with an action. An action. And this is where we'll leave off today. Peter says, laying aside all. Let's start right there. Lay aside. That's an action. But not just any action. It is an intentional action. A purposeful action. In other words, I am holding this paper. I'm putting it down. I purposely did that. Intentional. Peter says here, we have to purposely do that. Intentionally lay aside, remove, get rid of, however you want to describe it, all. Very important word there, all. And then he goes from there and he gives us this list. We'll talk about that tomorrow. What does that mean? In short, as we close this lesson, if I have to get rid of something that's causing me an issue, I can't get rid of just part of it. It's all got to go. It's like throwing out your garbage every Monday or Friday or whenever it is that you have it picked up or you take it to the refuge center. You don't sort through the bag to see which parts you're going to keep because it's so endearing and you have to have that. No. Because once the smelly parts are also in the bag, the rest of it is no good either. There are things we don't need. There are issues, there are relationships, there are items, there are thoughts, there are all kinds of things we don't need in our life because they don't help us. In our spiritual life, they often hinder us. They hold us back. They do not allow us the freedom to be who God called us to be. Peter says here, they got to go. We must lay aside all, and we'll talk about what the rest of that is tomorrow when we pick back up right here at Making It Simple. I hope this has been a blessing to you. I hope it's intriguing to you to say, okay, I want to talk about this. What does this mean? What does it take? We'll talk about that tomorrow. God bless you. You have a good day.